So there could be several things that led large numbers of Sri Lankans, particularly Sinhalese Buddhists, to vote for Gotabaya Rajapaksa. I think one that weighed very heavily on the minds of many people, particularly Sinhalese Buddhists, was this question of terrorism re-emerging in the context of the Easter Sunday bombings. So Gotabaya Rajapaksa and the Rajapaksa family in general had this reputation of eliminating terrorism at any cost, and being very firm and very strong on that without bothering about how and the collateral damages. So I think many people thought that to ensure that there is no more terrorism, it's important to have a strong, kind of a ruthless, no nonsense kind of a leader. And I think Gotabaya Rajapaksa's past profile fitted that in. And also I think there was this frustration with the previous government. The previous government came on a platform of good governance. They accused the Rajapaksa governments of 2006 to 2014 of corruption, but they themselves got entangled in major issues of corruption like the central bank bond scam. Now for most Sinhalese Buddhists, national security means no bombings going off in churches or Buddhist temples or in railway stations or in public places. But for Tamils and Muslims, they have different notions of security. For Muslims, it would be not to have their mosques, their business enterprises, their homes burnt up, vandalized. For Tamils also, they have a very strong sense of security or insecurity. They have been scared of the Sri Lankan armies, the Sri Lankan Navy, forcibly abducting people and subjecting them to enforced disappearances. The police, the special task force, and the military itself, torturing people while holding them in detention, and long unjust detention for years and even decades before they are acquitted by courts as innocent. Their lands being forcibly taken away by the military, and they not been able to access their traditional cemeteries where their ancestors might be buried, their traditional historical schools, or their religious institutions like churches and Hindu temples. So access to livelihood, particularly fishing and agriculture. So these are the kind of issues that Tamils and Muslims have been worried about and concerned about in terms of their security. So that is why I think they voted en masse against Gotabaya Rajapaksa. So we have seen this kind of a polarization happen yet again or re-emerge in these parliamentary elections, where Sinhalese aspirations are different to Tamil and Muslim aspirations. I think there is concerns expressed by Muslims and Tamils that they will again face the kind of harassments, the marginalization that they have faced for many years and decades in Sri Lanka, and also that they might face the same kind of insecurity they have faced from state forces or paramilitary groups aligned with the state, from whom they have faced a lot of harassments and intimidations and threats, and sometimes even outright physical attacks and violence. So Tamils are again fearing mass arrests and mass long-term detentions without proper fair trials. So these fears are there among particularly ethnic minorities, but there is another group that is also facing insecurity, and that is the dissenting groups. Now dissenters are very kind of broad category. Opposition politicians dissent from people in power. Then sometimes lawyers take on cases and engage in their profession in a way that will be in opposition or be a sign of dissent against the rulers in power. Journalists, artists, human rights activists, sometimes religious clergy, they all end up criticizing the rulers at certain points and proposing alternatives or different things, different policies, different practices. So I think these dissenters who would like to be critical, to challenge, question the government and to suggest alternatives to them are also in fear, because we have the experience that in 2006 to 2014 there was a lot of repression of dissent. So we don't unfortunately have a very good history to look back on, and now I think our past experiences also count on how we see the future. So in this sense, both these ethnic minorities and dissenting persons and groups are feeling some fear, and this has been reconfirmed by some of the things that have happened in the last 3 weeks as such after the presidential elections. So we had I think very regular occurrences of intelligence agents visiting civil society organizations and asking for information. The ethnic religious minorities are approximately about 30% of Sri Lanka. So that means the Sinhalese Buddhist are around 70%. So if a particular candidate feels that he or she can become a president, mostly based on Sinhalese Buddhist votes, I think it's not a very nice feeling for a multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious country. This can make our democracy to be a majoritarian democracy. Certain sections of people are marginalized or isolated, and they might get the feeling that their vote is no longer important. We have come to a situation where a presidential candidate has declared that he can win based on Sinhala Buddhist votes. That's, I think, a rather sad situation for a country that is multicultural and multi-ethnic, multi-religious. Yes, while there is a lot of fear, there's a lot of uncertainty, I think there are also continuing struggles that are going on, continuing resistance, defiance. In Sri Lanka, we have had, I think, we have worked under authoritarian rule between 2006 and 2014. We have worked also under authoritarian rule in the late 1980s when the UNP was in power. So there were the LTT and the JVP, though not state institutions, state groups, but armed groups. They also wielded very authoritarian forms of controlling people. So I think Sri Lankans have had these bad experiences before. So we will try to, I think, to survive another wave of authoritarianism. But at the moment, I think our hope and our wish is that it won't come to that. That some of these fears will not be realized. We hope that the president himself and the government will take into account these fears and ensure that these fears are unfounded and prove these fears are wrong. That's, I think, a challenge to the elected president, and that's also a challenge to the new government that will probably come into power in early part of 2020 through a parliamentary elections. And also, I think in the parliamentary elections, there's an opportunity for more diverse parties to come and to gain some parliamentary foothold and to try to make a difference to politics and governance in Sri Lanka by being a member of parliament. So if that opportunity is made use of, I think the minorities and overall democracy has a better future. Like I said before, I think as much as key feature of democracy is minority rights, and another key feature of democracy is dissent, how dissent is appreciated and fostered. And in that respect, I think it's very important that no government in Sri Lanka should have a 2/3 majority. But that will give them ability to do almost anything in between elections. But I think a strong leadership in the government must be counterbalanced by a strong opposition political leadership.